Britain says it's done its research and is happy that enough precautions are in place to allow arms sales to Saudi Arabia. Could you give us a reaction to that, please?
Well, I mean, it's an utterly incomprehensible decision. The United Nations and other agencies around the world have said quite clearly that the situation in Yemen, as a direct result of the Saudi-led intervention, is the worst humanitarian catastrophe anywhere in the world. This is an outcome of a war that Britain is supporting, that Britain is arming, and has been since it started in 2015. So this decision shows utter disregard for the loss of life in Yemen. It shows contempt, actually, for public opinion in Britain, which is broadly against the intervention, against support for what Saudi Arabia is doing. And I also think it makes a complete joke out of the decision, out of the announcement on Monday by the Foreign Office that the government was going to take the question of human rights more seriously and was going to impose sanctions against regimes that are violating human rights. Saudi Arabia is one of the countries in the world which is most clearly violating human rights, both domestically and in terms of its involvement in this war. So it's a shocking decision, and it's one that really needs to be challenged and really needs to be overturned urgently.
Yeah, London has justified the move by saying any breaches of international humanitarian law by Saudi Arabia are isolated incidents. But how many isolated incidents would it take to stop any sales, do you think?
Well, I mean, I really don't understand what Liz Truss means by isolated incidents. I mean, all the research, all the serious reporting into what's going on in Yemen is talking about a kind of a catastrophe on an almost industrial scale, which is a direct result of the war, which is being led by Saudi Arabia, which we are now once again arming. And, when does a series of isolated incidents become a kind of systemic problem? Who knows? Ask her. The fact of the matter is that research has shown that about a third of the attacks that have taken place have targeted civilians. Tens of thousands of civilians have been killed in this war directly due to military intervention, and a large part of this is a large part of those deaths have been caused by bombardment, and very often this will be by British planes. On top of that, you've also got to factor in the kind of wider implications of the war, because what the war is doing is it's creating a problem for any aid getting into the country. It's devastated the infrastructure of Yemen and created a situation where literally hundreds of thousands of people are on the brink of dying due to starvation, and in which disease is rife. We've seen a terrible outbreak of cholera and now a growing problem with the coronavirus, which in these circumstances is just ripping through the population. So, I mean, I don't understand what she could possibly mean by the idea of there being isolated incidents. What there is a humanitarian catastrophe that is widely documented, that is being directly caused by this military intervention. So it makes no sense. And I think what it shows is that the British government puts the profit of the arms trade and puts its own power projection around the world before any other consideration, including the loss of life on an industrial scale. I think we really have to get a grip on reality here. Saudi Arabia, as I say, is a serial violator of human rights at home and abroad. Domestically, they imprison, torture and execute political dissidents of all kinds on a regular basis.
Yeah, Britain, sorry to interrupt. So Britain has announced this week it's sanctioning individuals from Saudi Arabia, among others, over human rights abuses. But the UK itself has been accused by the UN of torturing Julian Assange. So do you see hypocrisy here?
Yeah, absolutely there's hypocrisy, and there's certainly hypocrisy in terms of the approach to Saudi Arabia in particular. I mean, these weapons are being these arms sales involve Tornado and Typhoon planes that are used regularly on the front line of the bombardments in Yemen, but also there's a whole range of other equipment which will be being used to repress and to suppress dissent and any kind of opposition at home. And, you know, the idea, we really do have to get a grip on reality. The idea that there can be anything humanitarian about sending weapons to a country like Saudi Arabia is quite frankly a joke, and it's a very, very dark joke. And you know, it's something that we have to really step up the campaigning over, because if they can get away, if the British government gets away with this, if BAE Arms and so forth get away with this without there being any opposition, it's a green light, really. It means there's no regulation. It means there's no oversight. There's no accountability whatsoever. And that's not a situation that any of us want to be in.
Chris Nynham from the Stop the War Coalition, thank you for joining us on the programme today.
Thanks very much.